Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the main headline, the news in context. The subject for this episode is reality. What is reality? This is a subject I wanted to cover since I started the main headline. So I'm going to start with this article in the Daily Mail. Do you see a red pill or a blue pill? Facebook reveals optical illusions that fool the brain into thinking virtual reality is real. Classic science fiction film The Matrix depicts a future in which humans experience the world in a simulated reality. But if Facebook has its way, this fiction could become fact. What if it already is? Michael Abrash, chief scientist from Facebook-owned virtual reality experts Oculus, said The Matrix provides the best sense of what virtual reality could someday be like. And he used optical tricks to prove that we are merely inference machines and the world we see now is already an illusion. In other words, our perceptions dictate our experience, and I'm going to come to that. Even though The Matrix was based on technology that won't exist for decades, if ever, The Matrix gave me a deep sense, he says, of what VR could someday be like. But he's confusing the technology that we see in the public arena with the technology that exists beyond that. And as I've said before, there's a massive disparity between the two. Summing up what's truly unique about virtual reality, the character Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne, said,
"What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain."
Morpheus made two critical points with this sentence. Our conscious minds never actually interact with the real world, and that we interact with sensors on our eyes, ears and tongue and throughout the body. This is just a very small subset of the real world. He gave the example of vision. I think this is Michael Abrash talking. Humans only have 3 color sensors. We can't see infrared or ultraviolet, and we have a blind spot in each eye. Our visual data is actually astonishingly sparse, and even if we were able to accurately record and process every photon that reaches our eyes, we'd still have too little data to be able to reconstruct the world accurately, he said. And Michael Abrash used the recent black and blue or white and gold dress as an example. I saw it as white and gold myself. Our visual system takes its best guess and sends that to the conscious mind, he continued. The way the brain compensates for the limited data it receives is by maintaining a model of the real world that it constantly updates as new data comes in. And it is that model, not the real world, that you experience and trust implicitly. We are inference machines, not objective observers. The fact that reality is whatever your mind infers from the nerve impulses sent to sensors based on the model of the world is at the heart of what makes virtual reality different and more powerful than anything that has come before. Technology is more and more mimicking the way we experience reality. And there's a reason for that, which I'll get to later. VR is about experiencing a virtual world is real, and experiences are nothing more or less than whatever your mind infers. What that means is that virtual reality, done right, truly is reality as far as the observer is concerned. Quoting Cypher in The Matrix, Mr. Abrash concluded,
"Buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye."
So it's easy to see how our experience of reality is only what we perceive it to be, and simple optical illusions can prove that. So in this first example, most people would read a bird in the bush, but it actually says a bird in the bush. In this second example, you either hear green needle or brainstorm, depending on what you're thinking while watching. And in this third example, the train moves backwards or forwards depending on how you choose to see it. So how can reality be fixed and solid when our experience of it can be manipulated so easily? And the Daily Mail article that I read out just then mentions the real world, but there is no real world. We're told that atoms make up our reality, and atoms have no solidity. They're just packets of energy. And here's a few quotes from scientists and researchers on atoms and matter. The first one comes from Israeli-American scientist, inventor and author Isaac Bentov. Let us now magnify a piece of bone. We see the atoms weaving back and forth like a field of ripe wheat blown by the wind. They move in unison and in beautiful rhythm. Acoustical energy is flowing through the crystal. Next we focus on the atoms. At first they appear as little shadowy balls vibrating about fixed points in the molecule. As we magnify, we see less and less. The electron shell is somehow dissolved, and we are looking at a vacuum. As we further magnify, we see something tiny moving about. We focus on what we suspect is the nucleus of the atom, located in this vast space within the atom. If we take the diameter of the nucleus of a hydrogen atom to be 1 millimeter, then the diameter of the electron orbit will be about 10 meters, a ratio of 1 to 10,000, and the intervening space is vacuum. It's actually not a vacuum. It appears to be empty space. It's actually a field of energy. I'll get to you later. The quote continues, as we zero in and further magnify the vibrating nucleus, it seems to be dissolving. We are looking at some shadowy pulsation, some more magnification, and the nucleus is almost gone. We are sensing the pulsation of some energy. It seems to be a rapidly pulsating field. But where did the bone go? We thought we were looking at a solid piece of matter. Well, it seems that the real reality, the micro-reality, that which underlies all our solid, good, common sense reality, is made up of a vast empty space filled with oscillating fields, many different kinds of fields, all interacting with each other. The tiniest disturbance in one field carries over into the others. It's an interlocked web of fields, each pulsating at their own rate but in harmony with the others, their pulsations spreading out farther and farther throughout the cosmos. Scientist, author of over 80 technical papers and previous research fellow of the Royal Society, Rupert Sheldrake, he wrote a book called Science Set Free, which I recommend reading. I have read it. He says matter turns out to be highly packed energy. American scientist and author Robert Lanza wrote in his book Biocentrism, it is easy to recall from everyday experience that neither electricity nor magnetism, some people say that electricity and magnetism are actually the same thing, but I'm just not going to get into that because it takes a lot of explaining, I guess. It is easy to recall from everyday experience that neither electricity nor magnetism have visual properties. So on its own, it's not hard to grasp, but there is nothing inherently visual, nothing bright or coloured about the candle flame. Now, let these same invisible electromagnetic waves strike a human retina, and if and only if the waves happen to measure between 400 and 700 nanometers in length from crest to crest, then their energy is just right to deliver a stimulus to the 8 million cone-shaped cells in the retina. Each in turn sent an electrical pulse to a neighbour neuron, and on up the line this goes at 250 miles an hour until it reaches the warm, wet occipital lobe of the brain in the back of the head. There, a cascading complex of neurons fire from the incoming stimuli, and we subjectively perceive this experience as a yellow brightness occurring in a place we have been conditioned to call the external world. Researcher and author Michael Talbot wrote a book called The Holographic Universe, and in there he says, what is out there is a vast ocean of waves and frequencies, and reality looks concrete to us only because our brains are able to take this holographic blur and convert it into sticks and stones and other familiar objects that make up our world. In other words, the smoothness of a piece of fine china and the feel of beach sand beneath our feet are really just elaborate versions of the phantom limb syndrome. According to another scientist, Carl Prybram, this does not mean there are not china cups and grains of beach sand out there. It simply means that a china cup has two very different aspects to its reality. When it is filtered through the lens of our brains, it manifests as a cup. But if we could get rid of our lenses, we'd experience it as an interference pattern, which is real and which is illusion. Both are real to me, says Prybram, if you want to say, neither of them is real. The five senses receive waveform information. As the first quote I read out there alluded to, when you go deep into the atom, you see vibrational energy. You don't see a solid atom. They're picking up waveform information. The ears are the classic with sound. They pick up vibrating sound, wave field, and they turn it into an electrical form. They pass it to the brain, and the brain then decodes that, processes that into the sound. But all the senses are doing the same. And it's a bit like, you could use the analogy of a computer decoding Wi-Fi. It picks up electromagnetic waves, wave fields, and it processes it and puts it on the screen in a completely different form to its waveform, its graphics and text and pictures and all the things that we know as the internet, and the television does a similar thing. And so an obvious question that people ask when you say this is a holographic illusion is, how come that happens when you do that? And how come I can sit on this chair? And how come we can't walk through walls? Well, that can actually be explained. There's an article in Futurism, or on the futurism.com website, which is why you can never actually touch anything. And it says this: to understand why you can never touch anything, you need to understand how electrons function. And before you can understand that, you need to understand basic information about the structure of atoms. For starters, almost all of the mass an atom has is concentrated into an incredibly small region called the nucleus. Surrounding the nucleus is a whole lot of seemingly empty space, except for the region within an atom where electrons and protons can be found orbiting the central nucleus. The number of electrons within an atom depends on the element each atom is supposed to comprise, different chemical elements. Like photons, this funky subatomic particle also exhibits the particle-wave duality, which means that the electron has characteristics of both the particle and a wave. The double slit experiment shows that, although some people have some criticism of that experiment, but it gives you an idea of what we're talking about. That's not the only experiment that points to there being wave-particle duality, but that's the most famous one. So the article continues, like photons, this subatomic particle exhibits wave-particle duality, as does an electron. On the other hand, they have a negative charge. Particles are, by their very nature, attracted to particles with an opposite charge, and they repel other similarly charged particles. This prevents electrons from ever coming in direct contact in an atomic and literal sense. Their wave packets, on the other hand, can overlap but never touch. The same is true for all of humankind. When you plop down in a chair or slink into your bed, the electrons within your body are repelling the electrons that make up the chair. You are hovering above it by an unfathomably small distance. Also note, various things play a role here in making collections of particles into tangible things. We have things such as chemical bonding, and of course the four primary forces, one of which is the electromagnetic force, which is said to be one of the four fundamental forces of nature which holds atoms together and reality together. That is also involved, it would seem, in why we feel solidity. And there appears to be, touch, basically. Chemical bonds allow electrons to latch onto imperfections within an object's surface, creating the experience of friction. So, another illusion, actually keep that one, another illusion is time and space. And as I said, there's no such thing as empty space. It's actually a field. There's points on that field, that grid of energy, that field of energy, which we perceive as matter, and there's points on the field that we don't see. And when you play a video game, for example, there will be the same experience. There appears to be space between objects in the game, but it's just information being decoded from a disk. In the same way that we are decoding information to produce our experience of reality. And time, I'll let Victor Meldrew, yes, one foot in the grave, Victor Meldrew, explain the illusion of time. I don't believe it either, but he makes a great point.
Time. When you think about it, nothing ever exists, in fact. The future doesn't exist because it hasn't happened yet. The past doesn't exist because it's already over. But the present doesn't exist because as soon as you start to think about it, it's already in the past. Which doesn't exist anymore.
Victor Meldrew is absolutely spot on. Who would have believed it? The Daily Mail article that I read out at the start also says our visual range is extremely limited, and this references the electromagnetic spectrum, electromagnetic energy in all its forms. In the universe, it's said to be about 0.005%, some say 0.5%, of the visible universe. And the visible part of that spectrum, which is called visible light, electromagnetic radiation light, is 0.0035%. That's all we can see. So what exists beyond it? Another fact. Every second, according to what science says we can see, we are taking 11 million impressions of reality encoded in the photons of light, the smallest unit of light. From that 11 million every second, the brain takes 40 to construct our visual reality. So what exists in the nearly 11 million that we don't see? People, when they talk about aliens or other non-human entities, people are dismissed and ridiculed, but we can see next to nothing. So why are we saying that the rest of existence, the rest of creation, the rest of this universe, never mind if you believe in any other universe, it's just the rest of this universe, this tiny little pocket that we can see, what's beyond it? Are we really saying that the rest of that is nothing? Do we really think that the rest of this universe, never mind if there's any others, is empty, all of it, apart from one tiny pocket? It's ridiculous. Of course there's a very high likelihood that there's other forms of life and other places to experience. We can say that at least. So I'm going to go on to the next level of understanding reality now, which is summed up by, or I'm going to introduce it with this quote from American biologist, pioneer of systems science and academic administrator James Graham Miller, who said in a book he wrote in 1978 called Living Systems that all nature is a continuum. The endless complexity of life is organized into patterns which repeat themselves, theme and variations at each level of system. And of course the reason for the self-repeating organization of patterns, themes and variations at every level is that they are all digital holographic expressions of the computer coding of what is a simulation. And simulations are based on coding, and on one level, this reality is digital as well as holographic. As I said earlier, the senses pick up waveform information, they pass it to the brain in an electrical form, and the brain then decodes that into digital holographic reality. And websites use what's known as source code to put the information of a website on the screen. It starts out as waveform electrical information, and the computer then decodes that into digital information and to put what we see as a website on the screen. And there's other forms of coding known as fractals, known as golden mean, the Fibonacci sequence, various other forms of mathematical principles that are found throughout nature, that are found in space and planets, the human form, because they're coding of the simulation. And so it's no wonder that you would find that coding throughout the natural world and space and humans, etc., because they're all expressions of the simulation. And there was an article published in Scientific American in April 2021 entitled "Confirmed We Live in a Simulation." And the author of the article, Fuad Khan, a senior editor at Nature Energy of the scientific journal Nature, explains that one way to know that we live in a simulation is to look for artifacts that remain the same irrespective of observer simulated speed, can be observed as a maximum limit, are unexplainable by the physics of the universe, and are absolute and without exception. And Khan explains why, from a mathematical perspective, the speed of light is one such artifact. American theoretical physicist James Gates led a team of researchers who found computer codes in the fabric of reality. Gates, in the equations of the basics of reality. Gates is a professor of physics at the University of Maryland, director for string and particle theory, and also served on the Council of Advisors on Science and Technology to President Obama. Gates' team of researchers discovered computer codes of digital data embedded in the equations of the fabric of reality, which take the form of 1 and 0, which is, of course, the coding that computers use. Because it's starting to be considered now in the scientific world that our universe can actually be a quantum computer, which would make sense if this is a simulation. Gates said they have no idea what the coding is doing there, but it must be there if our reality is a simulation. There must be coding on some level of this reality. And of course, we have the green letters and numbers in the Matrix movie series. The team also found error correcting codes, which also called block codes, which are mathematical codes. Error correcting codes reboot data to its original state or default settings when something challenges the stability of the simulation. Gates said he and his team had found a set of equations indistinguishable from those driving search engines and web browsers. American scientist Robert Lanza, adjunct professor at Wake Forest University School of Medicine, writes in his book Biocentrism on the laws of physics. Why are the laws of physics exactly balanced for animal life to exist? There are over 200 physical parameters within the solar system and universe so exact that it strains credulity to propose that they are random, even if that is exactly what standard contemporary physics suggests. These fundamental constants of the universe, not predicted by any theory, all seem to be carefully chosen, often with a great precision to allow for the existence of life and consciousness. We have absolutely no reasonable explanation for this, but if this is a simulation, then there will be coding, there will be algorithms that will be running throughout the simulation. And the Oracle says in this scene in The Matrix,
"Look, see those birds? At some point, a program was written to govern them. A program was written to watch over the trees and the wind, sunrise and sunset. That program's running all over the place.
The simulation theory was first postulated in 2003 by Nick Bostrom from Oxford University. He published a paper entitled "Do You Live in a Computer Simulation?" in the Philosophical Quarterly. And there have been other scientists and researchers since then who have started to talk seriously about this. One of them actually who first kind of publicly talked about it in 2003 at the same time as, or the same year as Nick Bostrom, although he saw it differently, is British researcher David Icke, who has gone deeper into understanding the simulation than probably anyone else has, certainly in the non-scientific world anyway, and probably even in the scientific world. What was interesting was I mentioned that Scientific American article earlier that said our reality is a simulation, and the limit, or at least the processing speed, the limit in that sense is the speed of light, which is what David Icke was saying years and years and years ago, and now a mainstream scientist has started, mainstream science is looking at that. Because you don't need to be a scientist to understand scientific subjects. You just need an open mind, intelligence, and the commitment to find information and to put it together in a logical way without any bias or without any limitations on your perception. And that's what David Icke's been doing since, in terms of the simulation, since 2003. There's Rich Terrell at NASA, who said in an interview in 2016 that he would say that this reality is a simulation, likely created by some non-human consciousness. And there's Max Tegmark at MIT, who has said that the physics of our reality and the physics of a video game or virtual reality are basically indistinguishable, which would make sense if this is a virtual reality. There's Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I'm waiting for someone to convince me that we don't live in a simulation. And most of the best arguments are traceable to a guy named Nick Bostrom, a philosopher at the University of Oxford.
Okay.
Here's the argument. Ready?
Go ahead.
Our computing power is growing rapidly.
Right.
We create simulations of worlds. We have video games with characters that are inside the video game.
Right.
Imagine a day where you can simulate a world so perfectly with life forms, humans, so well that you can recreate every single neurosynaptic thought you could have, but now you're in the simulation on the computer.
And there's Richard Dawkins, who has said that it's very hard to disprove the simulation theory.
Living in a simulation. Do you ever think about that?
Well, that's an interesting idea, and it's being promoted by a philosopher at Oxford, actually, called Nick Bostrom. It's very hard to disprove, and Nick Bostrom thinks it's not only hard to disprove, he thinks it's highly likely. His version of that idea is that the simulation is not a different life form on another planet or something, but is our own future.
Right.
That our own future, which may be artificial intelligence, reaches the point where it makes a simulation of its own past, of the process that gave rise to it, including us, including the whole of evolution, and including us. And it is hard to disprove.
Now, if you accept the simulation theory, then, and I would say it's more than a theory, but it answers so many mysteries that conventional science cannot explain. And what conventional science does is, because it cannot explain it, it concludes that it cannot be happening or possibly happen. And so I said earlier that our reality is basically one field. There's a field of energy, and we can see certain parts of it called matter, and the rest of it we don't see. So a lot of people would think that that means it's not there, but you could say the same about Wi-Fi. We can't see Wi-Fi, so if you said there's a collective reality here that you can tap into anywhere in the world, if the person you're saying that to didn't know about computers and Wi-Fi, wireless internet, then they would say that's ridiculous, prove it. Of course, if you get a computer, you can prove it. But we are doing the same. We are accessing different parts of this field, and we can see certain parts of it called matter, and we don't see the rest of it. So there's a field which some people call the scalar field, or scalar waves, that actually that encompasses this reality but goes beyond it as well, or at least its origin is beyond it, because there's something called quantum entanglement, where particles can communicate instantly with each other at vast distances, faster than the speed of light, and that's how it can be done instantly. And that communication is happening in the scalar field. That's one name for it anyway. You can call it the field whatever you like, but the scalar field seems to be one name that's used for that field. There's also wave entanglement. If you picture two pebbles in a pond, and the waves that propagate outwards and the connection they make, and that will help to understand some of these mysteries that I'm going to go through now. So we are living in a reality that is created by our perceptions, and we actually create our own experience of reality, and everything in this reality is a wave field of information vibrating to a particular frequency, and we create our experience of reality by attracting through what is an electromagnetic field. That's what the body is, that's what the mind is, an electromagnetic field. Frequency fields of like, frequency and vibration, which we decode into experiences, opportunities that we experience as our life, our daily life. So our frequency dictates the range of possibilities and probabilities we can entangle with, and we then choose via our perceptions which of those possibilities and probabilities we actually entangle with. So there's one level of the field which is very narrow, which is just a kind of where most people kind of are within the field in terms of their perceptions and possibility. Then there's another level of the field which is much you can access more of the field, thus you can tap into more possibility, thus what you can do in your life expands. And it's all based on perception of what you believe your ability to create your own experience is. If you don't know you're creating your own experience and it's being created for you, in all the ways that we are programmed and we are given perceptions through the media, through education, through government, through all the means of manipulation then, and of dictating our perception, then our experience of reality will be created for us, not by us. And the simple phrase of what you give out is what you get back is a very simplified way of explaining how this works. And people can start to dictate their own experience of life by understanding what we send out in the form of thoughts, perceptions, electromagnetic wave fields, because that's what they are, thoughts and perceptions, which entangle with electromagnetic wave fields of like frequency. And we decode this information into holographic form as people, places, jobs, opportunities, experiences, etc., and everything that makes up our life. Karma is basically just another word to explain how we create reality. There's no such thing. It's a belief in karma. And karma, I would say, without going into the detail of why, is actually coded into the simulation. I don't think karma is a natural law of existence. I think it's part of the simulation experience. Anyway, I might go into that another time. So, homeopathy is another mystery. How can you dilute a substance and dilute it and dilute it and dilute it until there's no substance left? How can that have anything to do with healing? But the substance is diluted, but the information in the substance remains, and it's the information which does the healing, because the body on one level is an information energetic electromagnetic field. And there's experiments that have been done with water which show how information can be retained in a liquid. So you've got the experiments of Masaru Emoto, sadly no longer with us, and what he did was he exposed water to various influences, sounds, words, and he found a way of photographing water droplets to show how they responded to these influences, and if the words and sounds were pleasant, then there was a geometrical pattern, and if they were the opposite, then it was just a mess. The Aerospace Institute in Stuttgart, Germany, saw 4 people from the local community take 4 droplets of water each and place them in a petri dish where they would then be photographed. Every set of 4 droplets was different, but every droplet in each set was the same. So the act of taking the droplet of water, placing it in a petri dish, impregnated the person's unique energetic imprint into the water, and that's what was captured photographically. Another example of experiments with water is the water crystal images of author and researcher Veda Austin. What she does is she places pure water in a shallow petri dish, then exposes the water to various influences, either sounds, words, photos, or even thoughts, waveform information. She then places the water in a freezer at a specific temperature. Later, she removes the petri dish with the water from the freezer and photographs the result. And, water is being increasingly regarded in scientific research as an antenna, meaning it can receive and process information. And water can receive information in the scalar field relating to Austin's requests. And, if people are going to judge possibility from the conventional understanding of reality, then they're going to miss the point entirely, because that's not how reality works. Telepathy. Another mystery which appears to be impossible, but it's only impossible if you believe we live in a solid physical reality. Thought is an electromagnetic wave field propagated through the scalar field. Telepathy involves sending a thought out and someone tuning into that thought and being able to decode it and understand it. When you're thinking of someone and they call you on the phone, you may have been thinking of them, but they were thinking of you first, and that's what you picked up, that electromagnetic wave field. Thoughts propagated through the field. Astrology. When you talk about astrology, people confuse a paragraph in a newspaper with true astrology, when the two are not even nearly the same. Understanding the holographic principle of as above, so below, which the satanic god Baphomet depicts, because the inner core of secret societies understand this knowledge. The global cult, the global cabal, elite, whatever you want to call them, running this world, because people continue to let them understand reality, and this is passed on through the highest degrees, or the inner core, whichever way you want to symbolize it, of secret societies. While a vast majority of people in those secret societies, as well as the general public overall, have no idea about that information. Holographic principle of as above, so below. And this is where fractals come from, that I mentioned earlier. And the scalar field, which interpenetrates everything in this reality, places astrology into another context, and another context to a paragraph in a newspaper. The movements of planets and stars affects the whole field. They're all different points on the field. When a person is born, their electromagnetic field is imprinted with the information of the heavens as they are at that point. The holographic principle means that when a person is especially influenced when planets and stars are arranged as they were when they were born. There's an as above, so below connection at that point. And understanding reality also means to understand the fact that the universe on one level is electric, and there's a lot of research into this known as the electric universe, or the Thunderbolts project. And Wallace Thornhill and David Talbot are two pioneers of that. and it's well worth looking into that, because we're told that there's no electrical level of the universe, but how can you have lightning? How can you have other levels of a lightning storm which we don't see higher up in the atmosphere and in space, called elves, sprites, tendrils, etc., which are also electrical activity. We see the aurora borealis and northern lights, another example of electrical activity. Electricity and electromagnetism pervade everything. As I said earlier, we have the electromagnetic force, one of the 4 fundamental forces of nature. And the electric universe posits that planets and stars are points or devices in a colossal electrical circuitry. And astrology at a deeper level understands the effects of the movement of planets and stars in different points on this electrical grid and the effect that that can have. The Earth's magnetic field, or magnetosphere, is the product of interaction of electricity with plasma, the 4th state of matter. And space, the universe, is said to be the part of the universe that we can actually see and experience and know about, is said to be 99.9999% plasma, which is a perfect medium for electricity and electromagnetism. Ghosts, another mystery. As I said earlier, we have the electromagnetic spectrum and the visible light part of that spectrum, and we have the 11 million minus 40 that I also explained earlier. So what exists beyond this tiny pocket of reality that is all we can see? So when an entity appears to come out of nowhere and disappear into nowhere, all they've done is they've just entered the part of the field that we can see, and they've left it. And when they enter it, we see them, and when they leave, we don't, because we can't see beyond that tiny band of frequency. And poltergeists are a type of ghost, and it's interesting that they are often experienced by teenage girls who are obviously going through puberty and going through hormonal changes, and it's often experienced by people going through stress and a lot of emotional upheaval. And when that stops, the poltergeists disappear, because it's actually through wave entanglement. It's actually the person creating the experience of the poltergeist themselves. It's not the only explanation for poltergeist, but it is one of them, and it would seem to be quite a common explanation. The emotion and thought wave fields is impacting on other wave fields, which we call objects, and so they can go flying around the room, and all the stuff that is said to happen with poltergeists. Shape-shifting. How can you go from a solid body to another solid body and back again? But that's not what's happening. The body is an electromagnetic field, and the mind, if you want to use the term the soul, is an electromagnetic field, and you can have different forms of life. Not all life is a solid body. You can have pure energy, you can have life that is pure awareness, you can have different forms of life, and you can have life that is on one level an energetic field, an electromagnetic field, and that can impact on the electromagnetic field of the person, and it can start to dictate their perceptions and their behavior. And the more it impacts on that field, the more it starts to dominate and take over that person, until it's impacting on the field so much that the person actually changes their form, because the form is just an expression, a holographic expression of the information in the field. So if you change the field, you change the form. This is how it's possible to heal people with energy and sound, and for the person to use their own consciousness. Actually, not saying it's always easy to do it, but it's possible for the person to actually heal themselves in this way. You heal the field, you heal the holographic expression of the field, which is the body. In the same way, as I mentioned earlier, with wave particle duality, it's the same thing. One question that comes up on that subject is, how can you have a wave and a particle at the same time? But that must be the case, because the wave is the foundation of the hologram. The particle is the expression of the hologram. So the two must exist at the same time. If you take the wave field foundation away, you take the particle away. So the body is a holographic electromagnetic wave field. And what you see with a shapeshift is we're decoding one field, and then the possessing entity then impacts on the field of that person so much that that field then replaces what we see, and at that point we see what looks to be a physical shift, but it's not. It's an energetic field shift, and then the person shifts back as the entity withdraws to how we normally see them. And a major study conducted by a team led by Dr. Sam Parnia, Director of Critical Care and Resuscitation Research at NYU Langone School of Medicine in New York City, found that people are aware they're dead because their consciousness continues to work after the body has stopped showing signs of life. He and his team looked at people who've suffered cardiac arrest, technically died, but were later revived in the largest study of its type ever carried out. Some of the people who took part in that study said they had full awareness of conversations and seeing things happening around them even after they were pronounced dead, because the body dies but the consciousness remains, because consciousness cannot do anything but survive because it's consciousness. And it's easy to dismiss this as, they were just making it up, or it's just misinterpretation or whatever. But the accounts were verified by the medical and nursing staff who were there at the time. Death in the experiment was defined as the point at which the heart no longer beats and blood flow to the brain is cut off. So, they say, it's different parts of the brain creating an experience. Well, the blood flow to the brain was cut off for a start, and the experiences, the findings were verified, as I said. And Dr. Parnia explained, technically that's how you get the time of death. It's all based on the moment when the heart stops. Once that happens, blood no longer circulates to the brain, which means brain function halts almost instantaneously. You lose all your brain stem reflexes, your gag reflex, your pupil reflex, all that is gone. BBC science programme Horizons in 2002 aired an episode looking at parallel universes, and it said in the episode, for almost 100 years, science has been haunted by a dark secret that there might be mysterious hidden worlds beyond our human senses. Mystics had long claimed there were such places. They were, they said, full of ghosts and spirits. The last thing science wanted was to be associated with such superstition. But ever since the 1920s, physicists have been trying to make sense of an uncomfortable discovery. When they tried to pinpoint the exact location of atomic particles, like electrons, they found it was utterly impossible. They had no single location. And this is known as the uncertainty principle in physics. Alan Guth at MIT said in the program, when one studies the properties of atoms, one found that the reality is far stranger than anybody would have invented in the form of fiction. They say truth is stranger than fiction. Particles really do have the possibility of, in some sense, being in more than one place at one time. And the narrator of the program said the only explanation which anyone could come up with is that the particles don't just exist in our universe, they flit into existence in other universes too, and there are an infinite number of these parallel universes, all of them slightly different. And as I said earlier, visible light is 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum. So who's to say how many other realities exist? And another thing, on that point, if this is a simulation, then there has to be a world, a reality outside the simulation. In the same way, when you play a virtual reality game, there is a world that is the world of the game, but you playing it are in a different reality to the reality of the game. There has to be a world in which the simulation was created, because simulations obviously don't just come into existence out of nowhere. So there's two realities for a start. So how many more are there? The sensation of feeling cold when a ghost is around can be explained by consciousness drawing energy out of the room in the form of heat to exist or manifest within the room. An electromagnetic connection on the person's nervous system is another explanation. People talk of electrical or electronic equipment going on the blink, and this can be explained by an electromagnetic field making contact with an electrical device or electronic device. This is obviously the easiest way for the person's consciousness to make a connection with physical reality through an electromagnetic field connection. I had such an experience once myself when I was much younger. The family computer stopped working, and my uncle, who has a degree in computers, was round trying to fix it, and everything was disconnected from the computer. The speakers were disconnected, and the computer was turned off. The power was turned off, as I remember it. Certainly the computer was off, and my uncle was just working on the computer, and then out of nowhere, the speakers, which are connected to nothing, start playing a song by Glenn Miller, whose music my late granddad was very fond of. And not only that, it was the song played at his funeral. And there was no CD, there was no MP3 player, there was no phone in the house. That I don't even think we had a phone in the house that could have made a connection with speakers anyway, that had that song on it. So even if we wanted to play that song through a speaker, we couldn't, because we didn't have it. And yet out of these disconnected speakers came that song. Another experience I remember from childhood, which happened a few times, is a woman, I call her a woman because that was the form she took, but she obviously wasn't human, following my mother into the house after she collected the washing from the washing line. She went out, got the washing in, and went up back into the house with it. And I saw this from my bedroom window a few times. And the woman was obviously a ghost, as I said, but she had a human form. And I don't remember any colour on the woman, as humans would have with skin and clothes and stuff. But I remember her as a grey woman. Now, there have been reports of a grey woman, but the way she's described is different to what I saw. One theory on this, and it would make sense if this is a simulation, a quantum computer universe, is that not every appearance of a ghost is actually live. It could be a recording which somehow has been accessed, and there are accounts of people experiencing the scene of battles that took place in a certain place at one point, and they've seen the battle happening, even though it obviously wasn't happening for real. And it's the information in the hard drive of the quantum computer universe, and I would say that's what I saw, because the woman never did anything else. She always just followed my mum up to the kitchen door when she went in the house with the washing, and that was it. She never did anything else, which you would have thought she would have done if it was a real live ghost. It's most likely a recording. Something happened there involving a woman in that garden, or whatever that garden was. That would be my guess. So, that's my explanation, but of course we always need to be open to all possibility. As children, we're potentially more sensitive to other frequencies, other consciousness, and the programming of a human life dials down that sensitivity to near enough non-existent by the time people reach adulthood, if it even manifests in childhood at all. How can everything come from nothing? And of course the conventional scientific explanation of that is the Big Bang, when there was matter and there was other particles and stuff, and they eventually exploded out, forming over a period of time what we know is the universe. And so where did the material, the particles and stuff that was there to start with come from? Science has no explanation for that, and they also don't know what happened in that very early point before the Big Bang caused the Big Bang to happen. So, and the scientific explanation is that you can't have something come from nothing. So they're looking for a physical explanation to explain how this universe came to be. So they came up with the Big Bang. And if this reality is a simulation, then it can come from nothing. In the sense that when you play a video game, everything in the world of the game is present the moment you launch the game. You don't need to wait for it to evolve. You don't need to wait for millions or billions of years for it to come into existence, or hundreds of years, whatever. You don't need a process of physical production for that video game universe to come into existence. It's already there. And when you launch a simulation, it's already there as soon as it's launched, as soon as it's experienced, as soon as it's decoded and processed. And so the next question is, if this reality is a simulation and these mysteries and apparently paranormal experiences are possible, then how come we experience this reality in such a limited way? Why can we not play with reality and experience it how we want to, if it's a simulation, if it's just information being decoded? And I've been talking and writing for 18 years now about a global cult with a nightmare agenda for humanity, which I lay out in my books. And for what is actually at the core a tiny number of people to control billions, they must control perception, because that's the only way they can control, because there's too many people for physical control. Even if you factor in law enforcement and administration and the military and all these people, there's still too few of them to control billions of people. So they need those ultimately behind this agenda must control perception to control it all. And that's what we have through the mass media, academia, education, government, Silicon Valley, etc. They're all means of controlling perception and limiting the range of information people have access to from which to form perception and therefore experience. And of course, through Silicon Valley, we have censorship of information. And the cult might believe that by now they have almost total control of information, and they certainly do through the mainstream sources, and the internet is going there more and more by the day. There is a deeper level, however, to this. When information is broadcast, even if only a few people may hear it or none at all, that information is still being fed into the field. It's still available in the unseen, the scalar field, to be tuned into by anyone, even without them hearing or seeing, reading that information. Providing they're operating on a frequency band wide enough, going back to what I said earlier, to receive that information, which is why we're constantly being limited in our perception of what's possible, because you're not going to open up to a level of reality that you don't even know exists. And so you could walk past someone in the street or in a shop or something, say nothing, but we're constantly emitting and receiving information based on our perceptions, based on our emotional state, and this is why you can pick up vibes from people, for example. And so you can actually influence someone energetically, information, even without them knowing or conversing with you. And in this way, this awakening cannot be stopped, even if physical or digital sources of information become completely censored. Now, the cult knows this, and this is one reason why, not the only reason, one reason why this technological cloud, the smart grid, based on electromagnetic fields, which is what thought is, you can manipulate people through electromagnetic exchange. You can manipulate perception, you can manipulate health. That's why this cloud is being constructed around us, and why the cult have planned from the start to connect the human mind to artificial intelligence. That's one of the main reasons why this cult wants to create this technological cloud, to stop people awakening to these more expanded levels of the field and starting to influence other people with it. And that's why addressing this technological agenda is one of the biggest contributions anyone can make to bringing this cult's nightmare agenda to an end. Because that is the end game. Human perception dictated by artificial intelligence, controlled by the cult, ultimately. And we're being suppressed in many and various ways. What we eat and drink, radiation fields, stress and fear, conflicts, divide and rule, pharmaceutical medicine, vaccines, the COVID fake vaccine especially. I call it fake because it doesn't meet any previous criteria of a vaccine. I've gone into that in one of these main headline episodes already, and I've gone into it in the audio version of the podcast and in my book Reality Check in even greater detail. We're given the belief that we're only the body through conventional science, which of course, if you are manipulated to believe that you are just the body and only what you see exists, then you're not going to open up again to other levels of possibility and reality. And it's interesting, there's been a lot of research that's gone on into the power of the heart. There's an organization in America called the Institute of Heart Math, and their laboratory research has shown that the electromagnetic field generated by the heart can be detected by nearby animals or the nervous systems of other people, and this is an expression of wave entanglement. The Institute have concluded from experimentation detailed on their website and in one article entitled Science of the Heart, exploring the role of the heart in human performance, that the electromagnetic field of the heart can be detected several feet away from an individual with magnetometers. They say that the nervous system acts as an antenna tuned to and responding to the magnetic fields produced by the hearts of other individuals. Every cell is a liquid crystal, and crystals are a perfect means of receiving and transmitting information, like an antenna. The institutes say that this form of energetic communication is an innate ability that heightens awareness and mediates important aspects of true empathy and sensitivity to others. They say this energetic communication ability can be enhanced, resulting in a much deeper level of non-verbal communication, understanding, and connection between people. And that fits perfectly with accounts going way back into the ancient world of humans being much more connected to each other, to animals, to nature. And it's interesting, and I've done this in the book, in Reality Check. You find that what ancients were saying hundreds, thousands of years ago, and the findings of mainstream science, how many times they actually agree with each other, which is of course incredibly compelling. Roland McCraty, PhD, founder of the HeartMath Institute, says the more heart-based communication and interaction between people, the more heart energy, high-frequency electromagnetic wave fields. The heart has the most powerful electromagnetic field in the body, and the HeartMath Institute has found that there's more nerves going from the heart to the brain than the other way. The more heart energy is shared with a planetary energy field, is thus, and this planetary energy field is even acknowledged to exist in mainstream science, is able to be picked up by ever more people, which raises the planet's frequency and the collective frequency. McCraty says we're all like little cells in the bigger Earth brain, sharing information at a subtle, unseen level that exists between all living systems, not just humans, but animals, trees, and so on. And there's also something called the Wood Wide Web, where trees communicate with each other and protect each other. And McCraty mentions Schumann resonance, which is a series of frequencies which are defined by NASA as, at any given moment, about 2,000 thunderstorms roll over Earth, producing some 50 flashes of lightning every second. Each lightning burst creates electromagnetic waves, light, that begin to circle around Earth, captured between Earth's surface and a boundary about 60 miles up. Some of the waves, if they have just the right wavelength, combine, increasing in strength to create a repeating atmospheric heartbeat known as Schumann resonance. This resonance provides a useful tool to analyze Earth's weather and its electric environment, and to even help determine what types of atoms and molecules exist in Earth's atmosphere. The frequency of Earth's rhythmic heartbeat is 7.83 Hz. Human brainwave activity operates on the same frequency. And there's an example of something known as entrainment. If you put you have two tuned violins next to each other, and you introduce a third untuned violin, and you just leave it there, and the other two are playing a note, the same note. The third violin will eventually attune itself to the note of the other two. It's called entrainment, and that's what's happening with humans all the time through our own energy field.
I'm sure all of you can recall conversations that you've had that feel really good. The ideas flow smoothly with strong rapport. You're engaged, they're engaged. There's this energy and connection. And that's where this really beautiful thing called entrainment comes in. So entrainment is the rhythmic syncing of behavior. Now, when humans interact, they modify or adapt their behaviors to become more like one another. It occurs in dance when partners coordinate their movements towards one another. and it should occur subconsciously in conversation. So if I'm talking really fast, which is generally the case, and I'm talking to someone who speaks much more slowly than I do, I will, without conscious awareness, reduce my speaking rate to more closely match them. Likewise, they should speed up to more closely match me. Now, the idea is that we mutually adapt and meet somewhere in the middle.
The field and the connection to the field is being distorted via electromagnetic frequencies from technology, other means as well, but that's one of the main ones to disconnect us from the influence of this field. And McCarthy says of Schumann resonance, the Schumann resonances were first measured in 1959-1960. There are 8 of them, all of which are on the same frequency as Schumann brainwaves. They are important because since our brains operate at the same frequency as the Schumann resonance, we can make a resonant link via one of these waves. The resonant coupling allows our brains to exchange energy and information with the magnetic field and vice versa. And the Institute of Heart Math have said that there's compelling evidence to suggest the physical heart is coupled to a field of information beyond the time and space. And as I said, this scalar field goes beyond our reality because it's beyond the speed of light. And the heart energetic field is connected to higher frequency levels of awareness beyond time and space. So time and space are illusions, as I said earlier. They're phenomena of the simulation. That's all they are. And this is why you can experience the same time as shorter or longer depending on what you're doing. If you're doing something you enjoy, you can experience 5 minutes as very quick. If you're waiting in a dentist waiting room, or if you're in a dentist chair, that 5 minutes can seem to take much longer, because it's just decoded information. And the Institute of Heart Math say on their website, heart intelligence is the flow of higher awareness and the intuition we experience when the mind and emotions are brought into synchronistic alignment with the heart. When we are heart-centered and coherent, we have a tighter coupling and closer alignment with our deeper source of intuitive intelligence. We are able to more intelligently self-regulate our thoughts and emotions, and over time this lifts consciousness, which is what we are. You know, how can you have ghosts, as I said earlier, ghosts, how can there be ghosts if we're not consciousness? The body is just part of the simulation, it's just part of the holographic illusion. What we are is consciousness. Over time, this lifts consciousness and establishes a new internal physiological and psychological baseline. In other words, there is an increased flow of intuitive information that is communicated via the emotional energetic system to the mind and brain, resulting in a stronger connection with our deeper inner voice. The Institute of Heart Math say the heart is an access point to a source of wisdom and intelligence that we can call upon to live our lives with more balance, greater creativity and enhanced intuitive capacities. It's well worth looking at the research of the Institute of Heart Math, which you can online. And listening to the heart is necessary if humanity is going to prevail. When you start following your heart or intuition and doing what you know to be right, that's one of the biggest ways to create a stronger heart connection, is to do what you know to be right, as opposed to what most people do when faced with a situation, which is to do what they think is right for them in the moment, which in many cases actually turns out not to be in the long run. When you do that, you'll invariably meet with resistance because you're perceiving from the mind and therefore a completely different state of perception. And there's a scene in the first Matrix movie in which Neo is at work in the office and Morpheus calls him on the phone to guide him away from Agent Smith's. That's, you could say, symbolic of intuition, which has a much wider vantage point of events, because it's coming from a higher perspective, higher frequency awareness. Eventually, Morpheus instructs Neo to walk out of the window and clamber along a ledge. Neo's mind responds with, "No, it's too dangerous, I can't do that." And he lets the mind win, which ends with him being taken into custody and questioning by the Agent Smiths. Actually, what he thought was right for him in the moment was the opposite.
Have a nice day.
Hello?
Hello, Neo. Do you know who this is?
Morpheus.
Yes. I've been looking for you, Neo. I don't know if you're ready to see what I want to show you, but unfortunately you and I have run out of time. They're coming for you, Neo, and I don't know what they're going to do.
Who's coming for me?
Stand up and see for yourself.
What, right now?
Yes. Now. Do it slowly. The elevator.
Oh, shit.
Yes.
What the hell do they want from me?
I don't know, but if you don't want to find out, I suggest you get out of there.
How?
I can guide you, but you must do exactly as I say.
Okay.
The cubicle across from you is empty.
What if they...
Go, now. Stay here for just a moment. When I tell you, go to the end of the row, to the office at the end of the hall. Stay as low as you can. Go now. Good. Now, outside, there's a scaffold.
How do you know all this?
We don't have time, Neo. To your left, there's a window. Go to it. Open it. You can use the scaffold to get to the roof.
No way. No way. This is crazy.
There are two ways out of this building. One is that scaffold, the other is in their custody. You take a chance either way. I leave it to you.
This is insane. Why's this happening to me? What'd I do? Nobody do anything. I'm gonna die. I can't do this.
If you take Morpheus to be the heart and intuition, and Neo to be the human mind, you have the perfect analogy for the human plight. The mind so often works against humans. And what if the mind is actually part of the simulation as well? On one level, anyway, that's for another day. So that was a very symbolic moment in that movie series, and given how symbolic and I would say accurate that movie series was, I don't think that was necessarily an accident. I think that is what they were trying to portray with that scene. And if you follow the heart, regardless of the mind's protests, eventually the mind sees that it works out if you do that. And so the heart and the mind then speak the same language. It's challenging because in our world, we are kept on such a low level of awareness. And so when you act on your heart, you act on your intuition, you act on what you know is right or believe is right, then people who are not at that level of awareness can't understand what you're doing, and so it's challenging. If we were in a world of expanded consciousness awareness, it would be easy because people would understand why you're doing it, and they would do it if they were in that situation themselves. The reason it's challenging is because they're the opposite. And the head, the mind, is the problem. The heart is removing the cause of the problem. And we have two levels of awareness. And one of them is thinking, which is the most dominant one for most people. And we also have the heart awareness, which is a much higher frequency awareness. And if we can just shift our self-identity from not the body, but consciousness, when we start to perceive what would consciousness do, what would the heart do, we actually create a stronger connection with the heart and stronger connection to higher levels of awareness just by doing that, holding that self-identity, which is not necessarily always easy to do, but that's a really effective way to maintain a stronger connection. And science has discovered a phenomenon called hypercommunication, whereby individual minds and hearts connect on an intuitive level to form a joint communication network. This is wave entanglement. The connection is made through the DNA, which is an antenna on one level, and the heart. This is one way to bring people together in mutual support with the common goal of bringing the cult's house of cards down and bringing a new energy, a new frequency into existence. To build a new world, a world of respect, which is what it all comes down to at the end of the day. The benefits are not confined to people, as the Earth's energy grid and magnetic field will be healed and its frequency raised, as the Institute of Heart Math have shown in their experiments. There's so much we can do on an energetic level, never mind a physical level. And one of the things you'll find as you awaken to this new identity of self and this new awakened perception and frequency is an increase in synchronicity, apparent coincidences, which are actually what you've drawn to yourself through your perception. And I've certainly experienced that over the last 18 years. Amazing synchronistic experiences and intuition and insights that that have turned out to be correct, that have given me greater understanding of humanity's plight and reality and etc. So these energetic levels, this is really where the answers lie, and understanding that we are consciousness, not human. This is the perceptual energetic level is where things are going to change, not physically. The physical, the holographic will reflect that change, and there will appear to be an awakening and things happening physically, things changing physically, but where it's actually going to change from is the energetic and the perceptual, because that is the foundation of reality, foundation of everything, really. So the heart and an expanded self-identity of consciousness is the answer. And that's why the cult so desperately wants to divide and rule us through all the means of divide and rule. Class, race, income bracket, gender nowadays, anti-vaxxers, climate change deniers, all these labels, all these forms of divide and rule. And what we should be doing is looking at what we agree on, not what we disagree on. And the cult knows what I've just said about perception and frequency and a new self-identity and the power of the heart and insight and all these things. They know all that, and that's why they want to divide and rule us, so we don't access that level of awareness. Because once we do, we can see through what they're doing, and we have the lack of fear to stand up to it. And the cult also wants, I talked about this in, I think, the last episode of the main headline. The cult gives us heroes through politics, through religion, and through a massive part of the alternative media now, which some people call the mainstream alternative media. Looking for heroes and saviors, to someone else to do it for us, and that demeans our agency and creativity and power to actually access these higher levels of awareness, and where the real change is going actually to be originating from. And there's something called the 100th monkey syndrome, which was discovered on an island with a group of monkeys. And when enough monkeys learned how to, when they learned a new skill, I forget what the skill was, this is documented, the rest of the monkeys on the island learned how to do it without being taught. And that's again another expression of what I was talking about earlier with the Institute of Heart Math, where hypercommunication, we can actually influence other people without consciously doing anything or saying anything with that person necessarily present. There's hypercommunication, there's energetic levels of communication. We don't need to know someone to influence them. And there's so much we can do on an energetic level. And some people call it the cosmic internet. That's one phrase I've heard for it. It's the same thing. This field of energy and information, and higher levels of it, are there for us to tap into and create a world of love and respect and understanding. And it's up to us to do it. And we don't have much time, because this world is getting more and more dystopian by the day. And the choice is with us, and it's time to make it now. Thank you for watching.